Adrenaline Motorsports. You're listening to 1680 AM on your dial, internet radio. And here today with in-studio guest, a good friend, a longtime friend, as a matter of fact, Don Prieto. What brought you to California? Was it just something different to come out here and see what was going on in racing? I know that you brought some really neat pictures with you, and you had some of those to share with me, and I was just in awe of some of the photos and the people in the backgrounds and people who were involved with these cars. Why don't you shed a little light on that?
Well, we were doing some serious drag racing in New Orleans we had worked up to a top fuel dragster, which was the fastest class in the National Hot Rod Association venue, and we had a Scotty Finn car with a Pontiac in it, and it was not very successful. And our major sponsor, which was a guy who was on the city council in New Orleans, he said we need to get a better chassis. So we ordered a car from Lefty Motors back here in Whittier, and we took it back and put it. He shipped it in. We put it all together, and when we put it together, we discovered that there was a kink in the tubing. And he says, well, bring it out to California, and we'll repair it, and we'll run it and learn all about it, and then you take it home and whip their ass. And I said, okay. So we came out here, and we talked every Monday night after whatever. He did drag racing out here. We did drag racing back there. We'd exchange stories on Monday. And so he called me like 3 weeks in a row, and he said, I was at Fontana last night, and I won, and we went to Lions, got beat first round, and stuff like that. And he said, how did you do? And I said, well, it rained. And after 3 weeks of that, he says, listen, why don't you move out here? It doesn't rain. And I says, what do you mean it doesn't rain? It rains everywhere. He says, no, it hasn't rained since November. And this was July, right? So I said, if it doesn't rain, I'm going to be there. So I went and sold all my stuff. And I drove out listening to the Dodgers win the World Series in 1963. And I arrived on October 1st. And I showed up at Lefty's office, and I said, well, here I am. I need some work. He says, okay, we'll fix that. So we went to Fontana that Saturday night, and he introduced me to a guy by the name of Kenny Drosbeck. And Kenny was the general manager of Mickey Thompson Enterprises at the time.
Yes, he was. He sure was.
And so Lefty says, you got any work down here for this kid? And Drosbeck says, well, send him down. We'll see what we got. So they put me to work in the machine shop, drilling, making rocker arms, and helping Gene Mooneyham do machining on the Pontiac Hemi heads for the Pontiac engine and stuff like that.
You've hit on some pretty famous names of the early days, and I want you to allude to several of those, if you wouldn't mind. I'm kind of deviating from what we're talking about, but you mentioned Gene Mooneyham and Mickey Thompson and Lefty especially, and in fact I think that's how you and I met, is that we went to a kind of a New Year's get together. I think
hey, Lefty was a kind, generous, hardcore racer. He had won the Nationals in '57 with Joe Dillon and the guys at the Money Old Special in Arizona. He won Bakersfield in 1961 with a gas car when he raced Jack Ewell, who had won Top Fuel. He was a really serious racer, and he was a good chassis builder, a good motor builder, did it all. Mickey Thompson's a legend.
We were talking about Lefty Majorsbach when we went to station break. Kind of continue on with that. There's several things there that I wanted to hit on. You talked about him as a chassis builder, and I thought that was very interesting in the early days because we were able to basically run what you brung, kind of a deal. Why don't you kind of continue on with that?
Well, until Scotty Finn came along and built what was called Chassis Research, which was a dragster chassis that was purpose-built for that type of racing. Everybody kind of built their own stuff in the garage. And when he came along, it kind of solidified what a dragster should be. The driver sits behind the rear end, the rear tires are narrowed, and he believed that the wheelbase should be one roll out of the tire, which was 98 inches. And so everybody had a 98-inch wheelbase, and
that's about right too.
And everybody put different kinds of motors. In some cases, people put 2 motors in these chassis, and they soon became outrageously ill handling when you started putting that much power and really good tires. State-of-the-art tires at the time when M&H arrived with their tire.
Well, prior to that, I think there was a company in Inglewood, if I'm not mistaken, that either was making a tire or capping a tire.
They were recapping.
Recaps, that's what it was.
Positraction tire.
That's what it was.
Yeah, Ed Kretsch was the guy's name.
I remember this guy.
And they were pretty good tires for what they were. They were recapped wider than the standard casing, and and they had one little slot down the middle so that if you got into some water, the water was supposed to go through.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, then Bruce, a company called Bruce Slicks, they did some recapping, and they used a more gummy kind of a rubber on their
compound.
tires.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and they worked better than the Inglewoods. And then Marv Rifkin of M&H Tire in Massachusetts came out with a purpose-built drag race tire, and that set the world on fire.
Yeah.
The first real set of tires that Marvin sent to the West Coast came out here to Curly Sear. Ted Sear and Hopper, they were racing. They were pretty famous racers.
Yes, they were back in the early days, sure.
And they came up to Fontana one Sunday, and with those tires, and they ran real good. And so Tommy Ivo, who was a consistent runner here in the Los Angeles area, he borrowed the tires, and promptly set about doing the first wheel stand ever.
Amazing.
He did about a 2-inch wheel stand at San Fernando, and there's a picture that he has of all these guys laying on the ground when he went out there the second time so that he could see if it actually picked the front end of the car up.
So that's where that came from, huh?
That's where the wheel stand came from.
Be
The
darned.
next morning he was down at Iskandarian's getting Ed to buy him a set of slicks. Then he went to Long Beach and he did about a 1-foot wheel stand, and CJ threw him out. CJ Hart, who ran Lion's Drag Strip at the time, says, Ivo, if you do one of those wheel stands, you're out of here. I want those wheels on the ground. Well, he did another wheel stand. He threw him out.
He was out, huh?
Yeah, but